I think once you get past 20 people, you start getting into a lot more operational stuff a lot more often. And like I said, we need larger organizations to create that history, that institutional change, to bring more money and bring people into the movement. Like it's essential. But I think you can start seeing a slower return on investment, so to speak, as you get to a certain size, by virtue of the fact that people create more things, that create more, if you want to stay focused, you need to do a lot more planning, you need to do all these other things that go alongside it.
Vicky Bond has done lots of impressive stuff in her career. She started working as a vet and then later ended up running a 100-plus person organization, the Humane League, which many of you might be familiar with as one of the key organizations campaigning to get chickens out of cages. And she is now the CEO of Madre Brava, an international climate campaigning group focused on food. Given Vicky's extensive leadership and management experience, managing teams ranging from 5 to over 110 people, I wanted to pick her brains about leadership and management in the animal advocacy movement. And this was a very fun conversation where Vicky shares some candid lessons and tips for people running groups of all sizes. And I would highly recommend it for anyone, whether you are leading teams or you just want to learn more about how to do it well. And some other things related to the podcast that you might be interested to hear about, it's that we now have a Substack, which you can find a link for below, where we'll soon be sharing summaries and key takeaways from all episodes. We'll also be doing polls where you can vote on the next guests, and you can sign up for this in the show notes below. And yeah, this would be a great help as we expand what we do on the podcast. And after the last episode with Sheer from Giving What We Can, we've had some people take a pledge to donate between 5 to 10% of their income to effective charities, which is incredible. So thank you, those people who did. I don't know who you are, but this is greatly appreciated. I said I would give up to £1,000, and most of this money is up for grabs. So if you're considering pledging to effective charities, now is a great time to do so, as I'll be donating £50 to Giving What We Can's Effective Animal Advocacy Fund for each person who takes the trial pledge, which is 1% of your income, or £100 if you take the full 10% pledge. And this will be up to a total of £1,000. So if you sign up via the links in the show notes below, there'll be a special tracker which will let me know how many people take it, and I'll donate accordingly. Without further ado, enjoy the conversation with Vicky. Vicky, thank you for coming on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, nice to have you on. Question we like to start everyone with is, what is something you changed your mind on recently and why?
So I would say most recently it's been around vegan restaurants and them beginning to serve it. I very much felt that very sad when a vegan restaurant would start serving meat again. And recently I've reflected on that and realized that if we want real change, actually having plant-based as default with add-on for meat is actually more likely to make people come in and eat more plant-rich diets than if it's a vegan restaurant, they may be put off. That's why the vegan restaurants end up shifting, right? Because they're not getting enough clientele. And it's really hard time to be running a restaurant right now. But if the change we want to see is people eating more plant-rich diets, then in fact, or, restaurants actually having the default as plant-based with add-ons is a way to actually get more people eating more plant-based. So for me, I am not shunning those restaurants anymore.
Interesting. Did something happen that made you change your mind on this? Do you have restaurateur friends that I just think how hard it is, or how did this happen?
Well, I do know people that are running restaurants right now, and it is super hard. But also just thinking about, I think why sometimes vegan restaurants are struggling is because there's more plant-based options. So people can go to different restaurants now that they couldn't go to before. And again, that's wonderful because if you're going with a group of people and they have more plant-based options. So for me, I've just seen a few here in San Diego shift and actually back home as well. And I've really had to kind of sit with that and think, what do I actually think we need change in the world for? And that's more people eating more of these plant-rich diets. So that's going to happen if the more typical, if you want to call it like that, restaurant is actually making more default plant-based with add-ons.
Yeah. Anyway, I think you're right. It's like it's somewhat the victim of our own success, and that as more and
Yeah,
more restaurants have options, then maybe like the niche market they were serving is kind of like can go to other places. So yeah, you're right.
exactly.
It's a
That's
challenging thing
exactly
to
it.
battle with. Well, cool. We won't be talking about vegan restaurants, I think, too much today. The one thing I think I was most excited to talk to you about is, I guess, your background over the last, I don't know, maybe like 15 or so years.
Hmm.
I'm making that
Yeah.
up, but
No, that's right.
I nailed it. From being a vet to a campaigner at, I guess, I think Compassion first, and then the Humane League in the UK, and then running the Humane League in the UK, the Humane League International, or the full Humane League, and then Madre Brava. So you've had quite a, I guess, interesting journey from running small groups to much bigger groups, and then back to small groups again, and kind of want to unpick how that all was for you. You were working at the Humane League UK, I think, for a relatively short period of time before you became the director or the CEO. I don't know what the exact role is. How was that transition as going into like your first senior leadership role or your first ED role? Yeah, how did you find that?
Yeah, it was exciting and terrifying in equal measures, I would say. I've been doing corporate engagement at Compassion Wild Farming and then moved over to the Humane League. And kind of, we joked about kind of going from the light side to the dark side because THR does a lot more, does a lot more like heavy-handed campaigning
Yeah.
and naming and shaming of companies. And then the opportunity to start THL UK alongside Prue Elliott, who was our campaigner as well at THL. It was wonderful, but also terrifying.
Nice. And amazing background. Well, yeah, we'll call the Humane League THL and THL UK for the UK
Yes.
branch, so everyone knows. So we don't have to keep saying those words over and over again. And also, I didn't actually know. So you helped set up THL UK, and then kind of quickly became the director after that. Is that right?
That's right. So there was Prue and I. Prue was campaigning, and I was doing the corporate outreach. And
Okay.
then, then we went on to set up THL UK, and we hired our first team was a team of 6. We hired 4 people in.
How was it like? So I think you ran THL UK for several years. What was it like running, I guess, a team of 6 or so people? And was it kind of what you expected? And yeah, maybe tell us about that in first initial few years.
Yeah, it was what I expected. I think one of the things that we were on a roll. Like the momentum was growing. We were getting retailers to commit to cage free at the time, and it was just a very exciting time to be leading an organization with really like hungry people wanting change. It felt very invigorating, I guess, and also it was a steep learning curve for all of us. We were all sort of starting this new organization together. We had the support, obviously, of THL, the overarching THL, which couldn't have done it without them, quite literally. But nevertheless, it was kind of forging our way in the UK, which was great.
Are there any memorable times from, I guess, this quite probably early stage, kind of scrappy period, where maybe you said there's like lots of early big wins and things are a bit more fast paced? Does anything stick out to you as
I mean, there
quite
was
special?
loads of like exciting times. I think one of them was Noble Foods. So they're the largest egg producer in the UK, and we'd kind of got the companies to commit. But getting the largest egg producer would be really kind of this is it, solidified. Prue and the team camped outside Noble Foods offices and did this kind of 24-hour camp out that
Wow.
really annoyed the company. And they shared offices with other companies. So they were handing out leaflets like, do you know that you share an office with this cruel company? Like they do all this animal cruelty. You know that they keep hens in cages. And so the next day, they didn't even have their employees come in because we were
Oh,
there
wow.
camping out. And then we got a phone call that, yeah, okay, we will commit to going cage free. And that was just, yeah, it was fantastic. It was like pure campaigning brilliance by Prue and the team. It pushed them in the direction they needed to go. And we were having conversations, but that's the beauty of this kind of campaigning, whereas you're having the conversations and like, it's time to like do the thing now. Like this needs
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
And so in those moments, it's very rewarding, I think is probably the best phrase.
Nice. And do you remember if Noble Foods needed much additional campaigning or pushing after that?
Yeah, they were reporting already and they were following through. So yeah, I haven't
Nice.
actually looked most recently, but I mean, the UK is really shifting to
Yeah.
entirely cage free. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like 80 odd percent as of quite
yeah,
recently, which
yeah,
is very
exactly.
amazing. Okay. So there's lots of memorable bits. I guess what was, I guess, hard for you in terms of kind of coming into this new role? I guess maybe not having been the director or like the top head honcho, so to speak. Yeah. Well, what did you find hard about that?
One of the lessons for me in leadership in those early days is recognizing that you didn't need to have all the answers. Like being a good leader is not about knowing all the things. It's actually about having people that are better at you at all the things that you
Yeah.
can then like lead and empower to do their best work. And I would say that I definitely had, still probably do, imposter syndrome to some degree. And so that feeling of like I should know all the answers and I should have all the ideas, and that's not true at all. And really being able to make those hard decisions. And that's where it matters, right? It's like getting all the information, having all the best people around you to kind of to give their ideas and to move things forward, and then to know when to make those hard decisions. That was a steep learning curve in those first couple of years, I would say.
Yeah. Did something happen that made you learn that? Was it advice you got from like your team or from someone else, or did you? Yeah. How did you kind of come to actually realizing it's okay to admit you don't have all the answers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I'm trying to think. What I think. I mean, you can't have all the answers. So by
Yeah.
you sort of have to learn in
Thinking.
that sense. But I
Yeah.
guess
Yeah.
there's like there's a beginning to is getting comfortable with that, right? Like it's not that I
Yeah.
ever thought I would have all the answers. I never thought I would have all the answers. But it's getting comfortable with knowing that that's fine. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like quietening the imposter syndrome voice in your head that's like, why don't you know this? Why, it's like, no, that's not what the point of an ED is.
I guess then how do you face those difficult decisions and where you feel like you don't have all the answers and maybe people in your team do, but I guess, yeah, maybe feels like that might have been a challenge, is like making challenging like decisions with kind of imperfect or incomplete information. How did you navigate that?
I think there is a part of leadership that is intuition, honestly. And I think I have been able to lean into my intuition. And I know that's like a very airy-fairy answer, but like
No, it's good.
the reality, you kind of have a gut feeling. And I think if you overthink things, that can be a real problem. I think that's another thing. Like I was a big overthinker in the beginning and just like seeing, and actually Prue was very, very instrumental in getting me to listen to my gut. She was like, Vicky, I don't have all the proof, but I do have a gut feeling. And it's like, okay, that's you, Prue, do it. And like that helped me to learn to trust my gut, actually. Now we're saying that out loud, I realize that it's probably one of the things for sure.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, there's always so many things you'd like to have more information on to decide, but ultimately that's not the world we live in. And maybe whether you like it or not, it's either your intuition or someone else's or some other combination of messy factors. Maybe it's good to just name that is what you're doing. Is there anything else that sticks out as like challenges for, I guess I know the context is there's probably lots of people who listen to this, and I guess previously myself, who have run small organizations, between like, let's say 3 and 20 people, who I'm sure have faced a bunch of challenges. And I guess is anything that comes to mind for you as like kind of key lessons you learned for organizations of that stage, where you like, oh, you wish someone would have told you that when you started THL UK?
What we learned quite quickly is that you need to plan for the organization you want to be and not the organization you necessarily are. Because we grew to like 20 or 28 people or whatever. And I think taking time to take a step back and thinking more broadly about where you're going and what you want to achieve and ensuring you have the infrastructure to do that. I think when you're a startup, you can be very scrappy and it's very exciting and you can move things very quickly and things can get ahead of you quite quickly without you realizing. So I think it's important to have that operational mindset as well. I think we're often campaigners to get into this. It's just like, go, go, go. And without that operational mindset, without thinking about the structure that will enable people to do their best work, you can quite quickly lose efficiency, I would say, without having that broader view of like, where are you heading? What organization do we want to be? How can we be as effective as possible? And that means having some of the boring sides of campaigning, which is to have agendas for your meetings and to have one-to-ones that are structured and to build in feedback. And that's the other part, I would say. You build your culture, right? You're starting out and you as a leader, you, at the end of the day, culture comes from everyone, but if the top isn't living the culture will not exist. So whatever you are doing at the top will trickle down, whether you like that or not. If you are not cognizant of the culture that you're creating in your own personal actions, you will soon see ripple effects through the organization. And the smaller it is, probably in some ways it can be more impactful. And so it's being really cognizant of what you want in an organization. So things at THL that we really valued, and I really value here at Madre Brava, as one of the things that attracted me to this role, is like feedback is really important. And that means feedback going up as well as going down. It cannot just be that people that are supervising people are giving feedback. It needs to come the other way. And I think that's how you drive an organization that can be able to take chances and risks, because we are feeling like we know we can make mistakes. We all make mistakes, or we know that we need to think outside the box, tread outside our comfort zone. And that will come with things that go well and things that don't go well. And that's okay. And so that's the kind of culture. If you want to be driving that culture, you need to be living it authentically, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I think, whether you like it or not, most cultures you can end up emulating the people that people like look to for guidance, whether it's the ED or other kind of senior figures in organizations. So yeah, that kind of role modeling, I think it's very, very important.
Yeah.
Maybe on the growth aspect, you said, you guys started, or maybe it was like 2 or 3 people, and then you ended up being around 28. It's like, over what period did that happen? And I'm curious, like, when maybe you started noticing some of these challenges.
So it was over 5 years. And then actually it went down again because there were people from the Open Wing Alliance part of the organization that then moved to THL International. And so it went down a bit. But I would say after you get past 8 people, if you don't have things in place, things will get quite messy quite quickly.
It's actually lower than I thought. It's interesting. Well, like, why 8 people? Like, do you have any examples of like what happened with you guys that made you think, oh, I wish we had done this thing or that thing?
Well, I would say without a project management tool and things, people end up not knowing what others are doing. You can know kind of, if you think about it, I think Amazon does talk about like you can share a pizza, but then be on a pizza, like,
oh, yes.
That kind of thing. And there is real truth in that, because the more people you add, the more interconnections you get. And so when there's like 3 or 4 of you or 6 of us, like in the beginning, when it's Per and I to start with, super easy, right? You just jump on a call. What are we doing?
Yeah.
This is what we're doing. For, 6 people, again, pretty easy, but you get past 8 people and you get into kind of 10, 12 people. If you do not have structures in place, people go off and do duplications of things, or they don't know one person's doing another thing, or they're doing this one thing and they're like, oh, comms, can you not put it out? And they're like, well, no, I'm doing something else or something. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I have a comms calendar, like, God.
Yeah. All the stuff that's like not, when you get into campaigning or whatever, you don't think, oh, I'm going to be really structured and do all these things. I want to be creative all the time. But like, you can free up creativity by creating structure. And I think that's very important. So yeah, I think after 8 people, if you do not have some of this stuff in place, you will start to see cracks appearing.
Of like maybe the various things you added after 8 people, what did you find was the most useful, or maybe even like the most underrated? Like obviously like HR is maybe useful, but like is there anything like you guys did that maybe you think that was like particularly valuable and maybe doesn't get enough kind of credit, or maybe it's not very sexy? Maybe it is just HR, I don't know, but does anything come to mind?
As a leader, you're not going to be managing all 7 people. And so you've already got a level removal. And so having skip level meetings. So that's where you as a leader meet with people that are managed by people that you manage.
Yeah.
That can be a really good way of driving conversations that you wouldn't otherwise get. And you get a broader view of the organization that you wouldn't get. I think that can be really important. I mean, we did this really from the beginning, but like having more, I came from compassionate world farming as well, where we had, it was a more institutionalized organization. They had a lot of those things. And so knowing that you want one-to-ones that have, a lot of detail, like structure to it and things, we brought those in early on, but I've seen that in organizations where they haven't got it. And I think that can be a detriment to really having productive conversations. You can have really free-flowing conversations, which is wonderful, but then some of the detail and some of those more nuanced conversations can get a bit lost if you're not being more like, okay, what intentionality we bring into next week? Always having feedback as a request, backwards to you and to them. Like those are the moments where you capture parts of the conversation that wouldn't happen without that kind of structure, I would say.
Yeah, I find the feedback thing always interesting because it's like sometimes you can have it on the agenda, and if you don't kind of purposely get to it every time, it's very easy to avoid. But I think having that habit makes it so much easier. And also to do it like outside of the meetings, right? Because ideally you do it when stuff happens, not just like in your regular one-to-one or whatever. So yeah.
But I think there's an intentionality to it. So our feedback is, and we do it here at Madre Brava, is like, it's both positive, like what great things have happened this week and feedback can be uncomfortable and depending on cultures as well. So I think that's where it's interesting. So in the UK, we're okay-ish feedback.
I think not great. I'm sure the US is much more direct.
It takes a little bit of work to get people comfortable with it. In some cultures, it's even more challenging. In other cultures, it's a bit less challenging. And so when you're working internationally, Madre Brava is international, THL is international, you have to bear those things in mind. And so again, how you frame it, like, is it about critical feedback, or is it about what's one thing I could have done you could have done 10% better last week? When you frame it like that, I think people are more comfortable in sort of saying, oh, actually, yeah, that could have been like a tiny bit better. It was great, but like there is an area where I think it could have been a bit better. And that can allow people to feel a bit more comfortable in that feedback as well.
Yeah, cool. Well, before wrapping up maybe chapter 1 of your, let's say, small charity management time, is there anything else that sticks out as like a bit of advice you'd share with others who kind of in this 3 to 20 person range?
Pace yourself. I think it can be very exciting to add more and more people, and it is, but there is a degree to which that can create chaos if you don't have what you need to support that. Yeah, pace yourself. That would be my advice.
Nice. Well, that is a perfect segue. I did not plan that at all, but I guess the next bit is about your time at the Humane League, or THL, which is, remind me actually, how big was it when you joined? Such is it now?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's like 110, 100, because there's THL, and then there was, there's THL UK, and there was THL Japan and THL Mexico and places. But like, I think of THL, I think there's like 110, 120.
Okay.
More, yes.
So yeah, a pretty big difference, maybe like 5 times bigger than what you were previously doing at THL UK.
Yeah.
So a pretty big change. Mm-hmm. So you went from THL UK to THL US. I guess, were you excited about the big group challenge? Like how much were you thinking about, how different is this going to be before you came into it? Or you can always aware like this is going to be very hard and I'm kind of like steeling myself for this?
I was very much anticipating it being quite different, culturally quite different as well. The majority of staff are in the US, although it's like maybe like 70%, 30%, I would say probably now. I was thinking, having worked at Compassion Animal Farming, which was also a sort of similar size, I was imagining kind of there is just these bigger teams, you're further removed from people, and that would bring different challenges, I guess.
Yeah. And was it what you expected? Like, how did you find that transition into managing a much bigger organization?
I would say it was what I expected and it wasn't what I expected, which is, I think, is probably the case for any job you enter, right? You think you know one thing and then you get there and you're like, oh, hang on a second, I didn't see this coming. I don't think I anticipated the change in culture. We speak the same language, and I thought, and even though, actually one of the memories I have from THL UK was we went to our first US retreat because they brought everyone that was like, the whole of THL together.
Yeah.
And I've never felt more British, honestly. I think that's changed now. I live in the US. It feels very different. But back then, everyone was whooping and cheering for the UK team. And us, they're quietly like, oh, hi.
This is too much. Well, how did you find that, I guess, managing, in the UK versus in the US? Like, what was different that was like, oh, wow, this is like a quite different culture I have to adapt to?
I mean, we have a lot of indirectness in the UK, I would say. Do you think, like, in the way that we speak about things?
Yeah.
And, when something's fine, when it's not fine, all the jokes that you can make about the way British people speak. Yeah. So there's like a level of directness, I think, in the US, which I love. But also there's a level of earnestness and, I'd say the humor's slightly different, and there's a fear of conflict that I hadn't anticipated as much. And I think derives from the US having very few protections for employment. And I mean that, like, it just, in the UK, we get contracts and everything else. In US, employment is at will. And I think that drives a different kind of culture. And so you're up against that challenge where obviously it is scary. I mean, I remember I was like, I don't have a contract. But then people don't want contracts either. So when we talked about it, it's like, oh no, but why would I have a contract? So it's just very different culture. Yeah, it's just very different culture.
And it's super weird. I didn't realize that was like a universal thing. But then, like, does that mean, like, how does it work with kind of any kind of conditions you might put on employment, whether it's like your notice period or
super short notice period, 2 weeks in the US, regardless, really, pretty much, unless you stipulate it. But what I think THL did really well was that you have a handbook and you have very clear outlined things like what if there's performance issues, there's a very clear guidelines as to how we're going to handle that.
Right.
Like in theory, by law, because it's at will, that means you can just fire people, but that you create a culture where you show that's not what we do, right? That's really important, that that's not what we do. And so that's how you do it. But for a lot of people in most US organizations, that's not what is the culture. Yeah.
And how did the lack of conflict, or like the willingness maybe to not engage in conflict, I guess, how did that kind of affect the things? Was it just like there was like difficult decisions to be made, like as a team, that people would avoid because maybe it involved people's employment being terminated? Like, maybe you can say more about like how this kind of showed up.
I think that THL worked hard on trying to like instill that we can do feedback, and that feedback isn't something to be scared of, right?
Yeah.
And that like it goes both ways. And I think that's really important. So I think that's something that was really worked on. And the reality is it's about building trust. Like, I was a new leader coming in, like they didn't know what to expect. Understandable that creates a level of like, oh, who is this person? What's her intentions for the organization? So it takes time to build that trust, I guess, over time.
It seems like it was something that wasn't just affecting kind of you and your immediate people you're talking about. It was like more generally throughout the organization. So even places that was kind of like unrelated to you, maybe this still happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big organization. It goes back to the difference between smaller organizations and larger organizations. In smaller organizations, you know each other. You have meetings with each other regularly. You kind of get to know people. Not only is it like a bigger organization, but it's an entirely remote organization. So that also adds a level of like distance that you have to work very hard to try and overcome. And then in the US, you're working on different time zones too, right? So it's not just like you're all in the same time zone. Each state is like its own country. We crossed like 30 states or whatever with the amount of people that we employed. So there's all these differences. There's all these differences going on. It means that you have to be very intentional about how you're working, I would say.
Maybe more broadly, what do you think were the biggest challenges you faced in running THL, or maybe if you can generalize running bigger organizations? Maybe it's like this, how do you build trust among a very large remote group? Maybe that's the thing, but is there anything else that sticks out to you as like, this was something that was like very hard to grapple with?
I think it's hard leading an organization, a larger organization where people don't know you and they don't have the same purview as you do, right? You have this much broader overview of everything that's going on, and you can try and be transparent about things as much as possible, but there's a limitation. Some things, aren't going to translate that you can put send out to the whole organization. So when you're making those decisions, you're making it based on the most available knowledge you have at that time. And of course, hindsight is 2020 and everything else. Well, that's definitely one of the biggest lessons, I would say. But also that, thinking more broadly, I've done this on the other side as well, where it's like, why is this decision being made? This is like not, and sometimes I think it could feel in a big organization, people don't have the same contact with you personally to understand why the decisions are being made, but also have the same view because of the larger organization. So
yeah. And how did you try to get around that? Was it just through being very transparent? Yeah, what did you try to do?
Yeah, being transparent. And you walk a line, right, between creating fear, because there's a limitation with how much information you can give, and you can overload people with information, and actually it can make situations worse. And I think I definitely learned that as time went along, is like, how do you walk that line between giving information so people have the information, but also not giving so much information that people are like, well, what the heck does that mean?
Yeah.
So that can be pretty challenging, I would say.
Nice. Is there anything else that sticks out as a big challenge from the time?
I'd say at the end of 2022, there was like a mini financial crash. I don't know if you remember it, but it had an impact on us as an organization. And at that time, we'd been growing very rapidly, and it was like we had started a new policy team and started all these other things, and we had to like stop hiring, like stop right now, and kind of decelerate and put the brakes on. And when you do that, that then flares up lots of different issues that you have to contend with as a consequence of it. And we definitely felt that going into 2023, of just having to make decisions around like, how are we going to cut back on costs? Does this mean that we need to do layoffs? Like all these kind of really hard decisions that have to be made. And while thinking about the wellness of the organization and of the team, I mean, that's essential.
Why do you think that happened? Was it just kind of not heeding your previous advice of like pace yourself in terms of growth, or was it just kind of not being sufficiently ready for like kind of large external events?
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much stuff there's only so much you can ready yourself for something like that, quite frankly. I think over time, THL has been able to stabilize itself more. But at that time, I just think the way that money had influxed in, it just allowed us to have this kind of growth that was, and like, it was a really critical things that were being built out in the teams.
Yeah.
And that's why it was so hard to like stop. Like, we have to stop right now. That took a toll on the teams that hadn't been able to hire yet, versus, because there's only so big a hiring team, so that takes time. And so that had repercussions for a while that we had to work around. It does go back to that kind of more than thinking next year, thinking 3 years ahead, like having that, but also you don't want to curb your ability. You don't want to curb what you can achieve, right?
Yeah.
Everything we're doing is so critical to now. We can't like, oh, but if this happened in 3 years' time, what would we do? You do need to live a bit in the now, but with also having some protections for the future. And that's that balance, right, between risk and being willing to take risks, and taking really and knowing when you're taking those risks, right? And understanding, yes, this is a risk I'm willing to take, versus maybe taking risks where you hadn't really realized what the outcome could be. And I think that's about that forward focus and living in the now, but also thinking for the future. And it's a delicate balance, I would say.
Yeah, and I guess you can say like THL grew quite a lot. I guess both maybe before you were there and maybe during your time as well. Here's like what kind of growing pains manifested during that period, or maybe ones you noticed that maybe you weren't there for, but kind of it arose in your time.
Well, I would say that it goes back to what I was saying before about like operationally having the support you needed.
Yeah.
When you're growing and bringing in new teams and everything else, it can be really hard on the operational side of the organization, both in terms of the fundraising side of the organization, and then needs to raise more funds to keep up with this growth. Yeah. And also with the operational side of the organization. So when you're adding people, you have to think, well, I'm adding all these people, but what does this mean for the more internal side of the organization? And NGOs can be set up to fail a little bit in the funding world, where they want to see like all the money going into the campaigns and the project without having that infrastructure behind it to really support and maximize that impact. And it can have such a detriment in an organization. So even the operations team did a really great job of being able to move as we moved as an organization. But I think there was certainly a period of time where we were kind of understaffed operationally. And then you're hiring all these people, and then you need to hire operations staff, and then you have to manage again. It's this delicate balance, right? Of like, where are we putting our focus right now, and how are we going to do this?
There's also the risk of like over operationalizing, right? In a way, we're like hiring, like, okay, now we have as many comms people as we do have campaigners, or our development team is the same size as our campaign team, so on and so forth. For whatever. Do you feel like that is something that happens, and like, how do you kind of guard against this? Because I guess that also inhibits things in other ways, because then you have more organizational complexity for the actual output you're kind of putting out. So you also want to not go too far on that either.
Totally. And I think THL had a really good balance, to be honest, in the sense of when we got where we wanted to be. I mean, there's still, like I said, it's a constant dance. You are constantly growing here, so grow here, grow here, grow here.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course you can over operationalize. I mean, I think that's something that you have to be super cognizant of, again, and thinking like, okay, well, have we got enough campaigners and everything else? Like that is essential to our organization, and we have to make sure that we have those. So yes, you can absolutely, I don't think you want to over operationalize, but that rarely tends to be a problem, I would say, particularly in the animal rights movement. It's not what I see as the problem. Like money is very scarce, so therefore everyone is shoestringing it to the degree to which they can. So I haven't seen that be part of the problem, I would say.
Was there anything else in terms of growing pains that you kind of noticed in your time?
I think they were the main ones, honestly, I would say. I think there is a level of working as a remote organization when you're a large organization and really trying to have intentionality there.
Yeah.
And communicating. I think there was times where I under-communicated more than I should have. And I wish like I said, hindsight and everything else, I think there's times where we tried to walk that line between what we can communicate and what we can't, or having meetings. Like you can end up having too many meetings, and then you pull those meetings back, and then people are like, well, I don't know about this, I wasn't involved in this. And it's like, oh, okay. So again, I think, and that's the challenge with a bigger organization. I think with a smaller organization, it's easier to change on a dime. Oh, this isn't working. Let's do this. Oh, this is working great. Or, or whatever. In a bigger organization, oh, this isn't working. Let's try this. But that means moving all these people to do this thing. And then, oh, God, that's not really working either. And then you have to move all these people. It is like driving a speedboat versus driving a, big cruise ship, quite frankly. You have to be looking forward. You have to be looking in the immediate. You have to be steering, and you have to know that things aren't going to change nearly as quickly as if it was a smaller organization, which leads you to sometimes not taking the same calculated risk that you might have taken if it was a smaller organization, because you can change things much more quickly. But I think larger organizations provide this institutional knowledge, this experience, can attract people in that you probably wouldn't be able to attract in a startup organization. Each of those different sizes of organizations provides a different part to the ecosystem of NGOs, I would say, that's really important.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess we didn't speak too much on the positives yet, but I guess maybe we can go on that, which is, I guess, what did you find was a very fun, big achievement you guys achieved when you were at THL, or other memorable things you're very proud of?
The fact that the US has got to 40% cage-free was just so monumental. When THL started out, it was 5% cage-free in the US. And that is so many, many millions and millions of hens every year outside of cages that it's remarkable, quite frankly. And holding those companies accountable and seeing that coming to fruition is wonderful, because when I started out, we were just talking about, when should the date be for cage-free? And now it's 2025. So that was really good. And I would say, one of the things that I love about THL is the Open Wing Alliance, and just the ethos of THL to be an organization that uplifts other organizations. And that's what the Open Wing Alliance is, right? Bringing money in from the movement to give out to organizations, to small, very small grassroots organizations working in different countries where there might not be anyone working on corporate engagement, and being able to train and support those groups in being able to do their work. I particularly remember Jollibee. They're the largest growing restaurant chain in Asia. Their headquarters are in the Philippines. And getting that win felt very monumental at the time. I mean, it was 2 million hens every year out of cages from that commitment alone. And it's just wonderful to see all the different groups coming together and protesting in their respective countries and things. Yeah, that's what I love about the Open Wing Alliance, is really creating change around the world.
Nice. Yeah, I think the Open Wing Alliance, or OWA, is a real, maybe, I don't know if it's an unsung hero, but a real, I think in my eyes, a real pivotal part of THL, because like you said, it's almost like this whole separate entity does a bunch of re-granting, supports maybe tens and tens of amazing groups doing cage-free work all across the world, and with amazing wins, whether it's Jollibee, QP, or others. So yeah, that seems like a huge achievement for sure.
Yeah, and I think THL, being the size it is able to do that work. It's able to have the size of team that's needed to support that kind of work. It's able to have the history and the knowledge and the experience to do that kind of work. And that's why, those kind of size of organizations are so important in our movement, I think.
Does anything else stick out as benefits of why have big groups? Because I guess there's always the trade-off. It's should you have, is it better to have 10 person groups, or 100 person group? And what else leans you towards this? It's better to have the odd, quite big one, maybe for this reason of institutional knowledge and blah, blah, blah. What else sticks out?
I think those are the main, the institutional knowledge, the ability to bring new people in. So I don't know if the typical general public is so attracted to the small, scrappy organizations, but when they come in and see this very professional, it's probably more mainstream, I would describe, organization, they're more likely to engage to begin with. And then hopefully we bring them into the movement, and then they also engage with the smaller, scrappy ones as well. And doing some of the more out there work. But to bring those people in, I think you need organizations like THL, like Mercy for Animals, that allows for that.
What misconceptions people have about running a big group, what do you kind of wish people knew? I'm sure people often gripe at you being oh, why didn't Vicky do this? Or it's so obvious. And and what do you wish? What do you say to them? Or what do you wish they knew that would maybe alleviate some of this stress?
I was very fortunate to do that job in many ways. And I think to sit here and say, oh, people should have thought this or that, it would be wrong. It's totally understandable. everyone is welcome to their perspective. And at the same time, it was a hard job. I don't think I recognized going in how much it would weigh on me that we had a $20 million budget, and how fortunate, I mean, I knew how fortunate we were, but like that would weigh on me on a daily basis, that like we need to be as effective as possible. That like, starting THL UK, I would go to the Christmas fairs and I would make a load of vegan Jaffa cakes and knit a load of stuff to make money for THL UK. Like, we're talking about that, like raising this money, like on these stalls. I would go around the country and do this. So I take that money very, very seriously. And to have this vast organization with all this money, I took that very seriously. And I think if you don't go into this work unless you care. So caring about that and knowing that you have a serious responsibility to maximize the effectiveness of that money and to do the most you can for animals, it does weigh on you.
Yeah, and so it seems like it's like actually like the responsibility of like, I am in a way like in a very important position. It's like, how do I use all the funds effectively? And that was the main thing, is kind of like, how do I actually make the most of this
yes,
size?
And also you're employing so many people. There's so many people that are reliant on, the people matter. And I think I really missed that ability to know everyone very well. I think that was a real challenge for me, going from knowing everyone very well to like having a lot more removed space, between managements of like teams of teams of teams. I really like to get to know my team well. And so there's limits that you can do that in a larger organization. You can spend your whole time getting to know people, but you're not going to be overly effective. So
yeah. I guess you can't skip level and meet everyone in a 100-person organization. So you have to, call it somewhere. And which is maybe a sad thing to realize.
Yeah, it was, honestly. It was, yeah.
I've never run a team bigger than 10 people. So I can only imagine, it's not just like 10 times more stressful, maybe like, exponentially more stressful. But like, how did it weigh on you? And kind of like, how did you cope with this kind of level of responsibility of like, I have 100 people that I want to make sure that they do good stuff and make sure they have, a job, and also achieve all this good stuff for animals with the money that donors are giving you. Like, how did you kind of like strike a balance of, I guess, like trying to achieve good stuff, but also like not have that weigh on you too much?
I mean, you just have good people around you, right? Like, that's the essential thing. And people at THL, the team were amazing. And I think it's not all on your shoulders. Like, I think that would be another piece of advice. It's like, as a leader, it can feel like that, but that's not the reality. Like, we're all in this together. And
in that case, you mean like the senior leadership team, like maybe you're like the 5 people closest to you, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the senior leadership team, but all of us, like at the end of the day, like at the same time, it's all our responsibility, and yes, the senior leadership team has that special, or has that elevated purview for sure, right? But I think it's important to remember, like, it's a team. It's not you and the team, it's a team. And so that's an important part of how you can sort of allow yourself to be like, it's not all on me, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's a useful thing to have in mind. Is there any bits of advice for people who are running, I guess, bigger groups? Maybe not as big as 100 people. There's not that many groups that size. Maybe like 20 plus. Like, what would you recommend for them who are kind of at the kind of slightly growing to expanding size?
Yeah, I mean, I think have a good support network. I think really it's essential that you have a good team around you. In some ways, if you're a small team and you don't have a good team, it has an impact. But if you're a bigger team, it also has an impact. So it's kind of the same advice all the way through. But at the same time, if you have a strong senior leadership team that you can trust, they're worth their weight in gold, I would say, because that is how you can really make the most impact.
So now you are at a much smaller group. You're is it CEO? Is that the role you have?
Yes.
CEO. I was like, executive director. Sometimes people swap. You're the CEO of Madre Brava, which is a smaller group. How many people are you guys now?
We're at 10, I think, right now.
Nice size. A bit bigger than a pizza sharing size, but still pretty
close. Just a little bit, yeah.
I guess what made you want to, I guess, leave THL and maybe pursue an opportunity in like a small team, whereas I'm sure you could have also found other great opportunities that maybe work with a bigger team, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to what I was talking about, kind of personal preferences or how you want to lead in the world. But I think for me, I really missed knowing my team really well. I kind of would say I'm more of the kind of like the coaching, strategizing direction. And while I'm comfortable and I'm happy to become this figurehead, doing promotions, I'm here on a podcast, of course, so I'm happy doing this stuff. It's great, but it's not where I get my joy. And I think in a larger organization, you're spending a lot of that time on the road doing that kind of work. In a smaller organization, the pace, the agility, wearing multiple hats and kind of maintaining those close personal connections with each team member is kind of more in my style. And so that's kind of why I made that intentional decision to move to a smaller organization again.
Nice. So it sounds like you probably feels like this current role is like fits with kind of like your maybe particular skill sets or preferences a bit more than maybe running 100+ person teams. Is that right?
Yeah, I think with my preferences for sure. I think that kind of strategic thinking and growing and how are we going to do this and that for me. I mean, you do obviously do that in a larger organization as well. Goodness, you do. But there's other sides to it, I think. And, less people, there's less operational stuff going on, right? By virtue of there being less people. And so there's a bit more of the kind of doing the multiple hats that I can wear.
So you don't plan on expanding Madre Brava into the 30, 40, 50+ range? You're happy where you guys are at?
We are kind of growing slowly. I think we probably wouldn't get past sort of 20 odd people if we were going to. That was one of the things in my interview is like the vision is to have this organization that actually like elevates other organizations by creating these kind of groups across the divide, across civil society that are all caring about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing livestock, but cover health, animal welfare, environmental, climate, and food in general. And so the point of Madre Brava is to really create this narrative shift by bringing other groups together to make us as powerful as possible, rather than us having this huge organization. We can create change within a smaller organization that brings people together.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how do you think about what is like the right size for an organization? You said maybe like Madre Brava is maybe like 20 is maybe in your mind. How did you come up with that? Like how would one find this answer for their own organization?
I think once you get past 20 people, you start getting into a lot more operational stuff a lot more often. And like I said, we need larger organizations to create that history, that institutional change, to bring more money and bring people into the movement. Like it's essential. But I think you can start seeing a slower return on investment, so to speak, as you get to a certain size, by virtue of the fact that people create more things, that create more, if you want to stay focused, you need to do a lot more planning, you need to do all these other things that go alongside it. And so the more people you have, the more your time. It doesn't go time direct, it's not a direct line of increased people means doubling the amount of work that comes out. Eventually that starts tailing off. You see that like it doesn't increase at the same rate. And so you'll feel that. You will feel that as in an organization for sure.
Yeah. And you think 20 is like when you started feeling that?
I think, once you get 20, 25, get into the 30s and up, I think you start to see a lot more of your time spent trying to plan and do other things, and operational support and HR things and everything else.
More internal facing.
With more people,
What's one thing you've changed your mind on management and leadership kind of over this period? Is anything maybe coming in or throughout you tried out, but actually now it comes to the conclusion that actually you should be doing something else?
Following your gut means a lot. And like actually if you don't do that, I think you often get into problems. So really getting used to feeling things and feeling, I've got this feeling this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And just trusting that is super important.
Like, is there any way you tried to develop or improve your intuition, or is this like partially through talking to people or just experience, or like how did you how could one improve this if they want to?
One of the things that stops us listening to our intuition is trusting ourselves. Learning to trust yourself, learning to forgive yourself when mistakes happen, and not just like forgive yourself, but also like what lessons did you learn here?
Yeah.
Like taking the time to think like, oh, actually, if I just, I probably wouldn't have made that decision. Those kind of things. If you don't take the time to do the look back on things when they go well and when they go badly, both of those things are crucial. You won't start to lean into your intuition as much, I don't think, because you won't be learning as you go. Yeah, we did that a lot at THL and THL UK, and I think it's very helpful in helping to build that intuition as you go, because you start to recognize, oh, I had that feeling and actually it turned out to be good. Oh,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I had that feeling. I didn't listen to it. And I probably
Yeah.
should have.
And this is like structured retrospectives on like maybe your hunch was like, oh, I think we should go after this target for a campaign, or we should do this, and maybe 6 months down the line you'd reevaluate. Is that the kind of stuff you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm talking about that. Or even like, we should hire this role. Well, I didn't think closely enough about that. Or what we need right now is X, Y, Z, and not always looking for the facts. Like I said, I think Prue greatly helped me when she was like, but I don't have the facts.
All the facts. Yeah.
And it was like, no, you're right. Why am I obsessed? I trained as a scientist. I blame that, honestly.
Yeah.
You know, but there has to be a level of curiosity and trust that comes into campaigning, a lot of it, in fact. And I think you will learn over time what your intuition by being a bit analytical of it at the beginning, I would say.
Yeah, makes sense. And maybe either from your experience or from seeing other people, what do you think makes a good leader, especially for people running animal advocacy organizations?
I mean, as a leader, your role is to empower people. I mean, that's what I think is essential, is to help people be their best selves in their work and in what they're doing. And I think it's important to lead with empathy. I think it's very important to remember that we're all human and we all have lives and things can happen. And I think that's really important. And caring about people matters. Being able to make hard decisions is essential. And I think that can be where people want to be liked a lot.
Yeah.
And the reality is, I mean, it's a cliche, right? But like, it's not about being liked. It's about respect. It's about being able to trust people and to know that there's going to be honesty and authenticity. I think that's really important, and transparency wherever possible as a leader is really key too. And if you're working in a remote environment, being more intentional about that as well. Things are easily lost when you're not seeing people every day.
Yeah, I think the remote stuff is very challenging. I think it's somewhat of a shame that I think basically all the major groups in our movement are remote, and I think that probably has some drawbacks to like this cohesion and trust and everything. I guess to what extent do you think that's a big issue, or kind of how have you found, like, what have you found works quite well for kind of building trust and good relationships despite being all remote?
Well, having moments when you come together and be in person. So those retreats really matter.
Yeah.
Having those in-person times and making the most of them, but recognizing obviously that can be quite overwhelming when you're thrust into
100 people.
100 plus people for 3 days or whatever it might be. And so giving enough space. I mean, I think one of the things we learned over time was not to pack the agenda, because you're like, oh my God, they've got all this time. We're together, and like, we're never together. Like, actually, you get so much more by having more spare time than you do by having a really packed agenda. And that was something we learned kind of a couple of years in, where it was like, the feedback was like, I was just exhausted by the last day. I couldn't do anything. And it's like, oh, hang on, this is not this is not achieving what we're hoping to achieve, if that's how people feel. We have something we put in place at THR UK called Fika, which is based off the Swedish.
Oh, yes. I've heard about this.
Yeah. So it's basically, I mean, Sweden have it going on, really, don't they? They take like a 2:30 break every day, where they sit and have cake and tea together and they chat, and it's just
funny.
delightful. It's delightful. So we went to Sweden and worked with Euronstrat, and this is where we learned about Fika, and we brought that to
That's cool.
THR UK. So we'd have these kind of what you would call also like talks around the water cooler or whatever I think they call it in the US. Like those moments where we had like 30 minutes or once or twice a week where people can just sit and
it's
chat.
The whole team.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And that worked much better in the UK when we're on the same time zone. In the US, it was so much harder with different time zones. So there wasn't like that structured amount in the day. And that made it really, really tricky, to be honest. It didn't really work so well.
Yeah.
But in the same time zone, it works. It works.
Yeah. And I guess that's just your immediate team, not the whole organization, right? Because otherwise...
at THR UK, it was the whole org. People could just drop in and do whatever. And then like at THR, we had them over different days, so you could drop into the ones. But I think again, if you get a bigger organization, people get a bit more nervous because they don't know who they're going to be talking to. And so that's, again, one of those things you have to kind of overcome.
Yeah. Also, if you jump on a call and it's like 40 people there, it's like, wow.
No, that
it feels like a high bar to
yes.
speak.
Yeah, that can make it really tricky. And so some of the things we did in the beginning was like have an icebreaker question that sort of kicked off the conversation, which can be nice to like help people not feel quite so intimidated going into the conversation as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so meeting in person, having those kind of moments that you intentionally create time where you're not having to chat about work, you're just chatting. And then obviously making sure there's moments in team meetings and everything else where there's connection, because it's about creating connection essentially, but also it's about solving hard problems together and things. That can be a great way of building trust.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to be all this kind of, oh, let's keep it light. It can be really hard. But if you as a team can then get through that really hard problem together and come out the other side, that can be a real team building experience as well.
Speaking of hard problems, we're doing this mass lobby day tomorrow. So we're going to bring like 80 to 100 people to Parliament to meet with their MPs. And we have like 20, 25 meetings set up. We feel pretty good. But anyway, so we were printing off like 300 pieces of paper to help, like these leaflets for people to learn about the issue. And we were in the AIM office, Ambitious Impact. And the printer broke, and this is like me and my partner Ellie. So we spent like an hour like fiddling with the smallest screws of the printer, like really stressed. It's kind of an expensive printer, and we're kind of like sweating. We're like, are we gonna like have we broken? Like, is this gonna be like the days in 2 days? Like, this is our last chance. But we got through it, and we're like, wow, that was a really amazing experience. Like solving a problem together. Solving this big didn't feel like a big challenge. Maybe saying it now, but at the time it was like, this is a big deal.
Yeah, so it does. It really bonds you.
I definitely agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
So things outside of work, I'm curious, like what has helped you think like be a better leader internally, or just like helped you generally in your career, where it can be like, it can be related to leadership or not?
I think meditation. I mean, I know that's very like cheesy because everyone says meditation now, but I do mean it.
Yeah.
I do find it's been extremely impactful. I hadn't meditated before, and when I started THU UK, I went to a silent meditation retreat. So I'd heard that if you're going to learn meditation, silent retreat's good. And then if you want to do it properly, you should do 10 days. So I just went and did a 10-day silent retreat.
With like no experience and no prior meditation?
No.
Wow.
Most people thought there was no way I could be quiet for 10 days, including, quite frankly.
How did you do? You managed?
Well, on day 3, I thought I might be losing my mind. Say it was pretty tough.
Yeah, I've done one of those as well. I think I was like counting down the hours from like day 1 or day 2. It's pretty intense.
But I think if you get over day 3 hump, personally for me, like there's a day 3 hump where you're like, oh, I can't do this. Another week left. And then also day 7 is really hard for me because I just did a silent retreat this year as well. I did the second one in January in Joshua Tree here, which was pretty cool. Yeah. So anyway, so I learned meditation that for me really, really helped with the chatter in my brain. So I am an overthinker. I'm less of an overthinker now than I was, but that really would impact my sleep very detrimentally.
Oh, really? As in like you'd be kind of like stewing on big decisions and like I'm not able to sleep because your mind is very active?
Yeah. Just worrying all the time, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I've had that a little bit. I'm sure you had that much worse. I guess when you have more responsibility, I'm sure it just amps up.
I would say that the meditation has really helped in quieting the chatter and giving me, everyone thinks meditation is about not having thoughts in your head. I wish that were true, but sadly it's not. But it's just about recognizing when thoughts come back and then coming back to the breath. And it's just very powerful. And I recognized maybe 2 years into meditation, you certainly don't feel it for the first year. I personally didn't feel anything different for the first year, but it's when you look back, you kind of, there was something that happened where I ended up getting, I don't know, I can't remember, something that happened that would have, not in work life, it was in real, like in my personal life, that would have completely just like destroyed me. I'd just been like, I can't believe I made this mistake. I can't believe I did this, like, blah, 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 blah. And instead I was just like, oh, okay, well. And then I was like, wow, that is progress.
Wow, that is pretty amazing.
Yeah. And so I feel like these days, I think from years, God, it's been years now. I can't believe it's been so many years of meditating every day. It has definitely had a really, really positive impact. And I think, I did a mindful leadership course and they talked about meditation there and how you show up to meetings. And I mean, that is another piece of advice really, is like we talked about culture, but how you show up to a meeting impacts everyone around you. You don't feel different in yourself, right? Oh, I certainly didn't. I was like, I'm just me. But then suddenly you have this other hierarchy that is viewed very differently by other people. And it can be very hard. It's quite isolating in many ways, but also it can be hard to remember that. You like have to be mindful of that. So like not speaking up first in meetings, sitting back and because otherwise once you've made your point, everyone thinks, oh God, I should probably just agree with that, which is not what you want. Like that's not what you want. But like it's human nature for people to be therefore anxious about sharing if they're going to go against what you've said. So kind of remembering that hierarchy exists and sitting back and listening. I mean, that's another thing that makes a good leader. Essential is listening. I completely missed that out, but that is really essential in leadership. Good leaders go last, as they say, and that's really important, I think. So so meditation, I think, allows you to take stock of yourself, to turn up in meetings better, like more grounded. Even if you just spend 30 seconds before you go into a meeting, just grounding yourself.
Yeah.
I had a friend say, I meditate all the time. I'm just like, meditation is a practice that you do every minute of the day. And I was like, well, I wish I could say that was the same for me, but it's sadly not. But there is something in that, right? It's that being being mindful, catching yourself in those moments that matter. So
do you try bringing it into work at all? Because at Mobius we start every meeting with a minute of mindfulness. I wonder if you tried to do that at THL.
We have done that,
or Madre Brava.
Absolutely, I've done that in the past. Different people have different comfort levels with that, I find. So in the early days, the more you talk about this, the more you remember over time, right? It comes back to you. Haven't really thought about these things, but is in remote settings is sitting with the discomfort of people not speaking for a while. Like in a room, somehow that feels more comfortable, but online where everyone's quiet and you want to just fill the space, it's like, no, like take a step back and I'll often be very intentional saying like, I'm going to give everyone a minute to think about that. So we're going to sit in this awkward silence for a minute in case anyone comes up with anything else. And often that's when things come up, right? When you give people a minute to like think and have that space, but it can feel very awkward. So naming it can be helpful, I think, in allowing people to have that space to think a minute beforehand.
I guess you want some people who aren't the most talkative to kind of have input, and you by de facto you just have to say like, when anyone else hasn't spoken, like we'll just wait a minute for you, and then this is like
exactly
forces it, otherwise it never happens, which is definitely a shame.
Yeah, definitely, and those voices are so important. So it's essential.
Before we may round up this pretty wide ranging and fun chat about leadership and management and everything in between, is there anything else you want to say that maybe you didn't cover as like interesting lessons you learned, like lessons for other people, or is there anything that maybe is now come to your memory that you wanted to mention previously?
Don't let self-limiting thoughts get the better of you, I guess. Like I remember when I started THL UK, I went and did cliff jumping, and I was like, if I can jump off this cliff, it was very high, then I can do this. Do you know what I mean? Like doing stuff outside of your comfort zone in real life can allow you to find more ease to do stuff out of your comfort zone, I think, in your working life, because you're pushing yourself outside those boundaries. Nice. And just remembering that growth doesn't come unless you step outside of that comfort zone. So try not to listen to the self-doubt and push yourself forward. I think that's really important.
Nice, that's cool. Actually, maybe I did have one question you jogged my memory. I was on imposter syndrome. Like you mentioning you had that maybe quite a lot early on, and I'm kind of curious to see like how have you managed to kind of deal with it or get over it or quieten that voice?
Yeah. So I would say definitely. I see it a lot.
Besides cliff jumping.
Yeah, besides cliff jumping, which I don't necessarily recommend. There's a good book on imposter syndrome that helped. It was called The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women. It is not just for women, by the way, this book. I don't love the title for many reasons, but it helps identify different ways that imposter syndrome can show up. And I think self-awareness is the first step in overcoming anything. And then I'd say meditation helped because it kind of quiets the chatter that can happen and allows you to process things more effectively than if you're just sleeping, for instance. And then I would say more broadly, It's just pushing yourself a little bit outside your comfort zone. And every time you push yourself outside your comfort zone and it goes well, which it will, inevitably, things will go well, things won't go well. That's just like a little bit of encouragement, right? That like, oh no, I do know something.
Yeah.
Maybe I am okay at doing this. That can help you. And I feel like in the NGO world, I've seen a lot of people with imposter syndrome. I feel like very, very sensitive people come into this space, sometimes with bad experiences in previous roles. And again, I think that's important part of being a leader is just like being there to listen, support, and guide, and try to recognize when imposter syndrome is playing a role and maybe bring that up, because I think some people don't realize that they're suffering from imposter syndrome, and you can see as a leader or as a manager that that's kind of what's happening, and bolstering them and giving a lot of encouragement, I think, is essential in being able to kind of overcome that. And I was really lucky to have Dave Coman-Heidi as like a mentor at THL, and he was our chairperson of the board and just real support in like giving me more confidence, I would say.
Nice. That's great. Yeah, I find that even when sometimes go well, people can still be like, like they don't dwell on the successes, they quickly move on, or they kind of maybe try to explain that away. So I think having some sort of positive reinforcement or like forcing yourself to dwell on the achievements, I think is quite important.
Yeah, definitely.
After I tried to close this section the first time, we had some more interesting stuff to discuss, so we are closing it a second time. But yeah, lots of, I mean, it's kind of good to make the most of your kind of varied and cool experience. On to Madre Brava. So you've been running Madre Brava for the last, how long is it now, Vicky?
Since March, however long that's been.
Nice. Relatively new. Yeah, some months. Yeah. And many people who don't know what Madre Brava is and what you guys do you want to explain that maybe in a nutshell?
Yeah, so Madre Brava's focus is to create a world where there's 100% sustainable, healthy, and affordable food for all. And what that means in practice is that we're making a bold shift to more plants in food, primarily through working with multinational food retailers. So getting them to work on their protein offerings, so helping them provide their customers with more plant-rich proteins and reducing the number of animal-based proteins in their supply chains. And also convening groups across civil society to speak up together with a unified voice. So bring health groups, environment groups, climate groups, etc., animal welfare groups together as one voice to make this change.
Yeah. So like very tangibly, that would be involving, let's say, campaigning against a supermarket like Aldi or Lidl and saying, hey, you currently serve 20% of your all your proteins as plants. I want it to be 40% by this date. Is that basically like the thing in a nutshell?
Essentially, yeah.
Nice. And why do you think this is important to work on? Like, I guess, why did you move to this from doing, cage-free and direct animal welfare and corporate welfare work? Like, why do you think this is valuable to augment the rest of the movement with?
Well, I think this is a critical time for change generally. Well, retailers contribute huge amounts of greenhouse gas emissions and everything is interconnected. So livestock contributes more greenhouse gases than trains, planes, and automobiles combined. And so when we look more holistically at the interconnectedness, we're not just talking about greenhouse gas emissions, honestly. We're talking about the fact that we all eat too much meat for our health, that we need fewer animals like chickens being raised so that we can have higher welfare systems, that we need to reduce pollutions in our local areas and communities like rivers and things, and that we need to free up land. We're losing biodiversity in the world at a staggering rate. And much of that is coming from the destruction of the rainforest. And people think about beef from the rainforest, but actually the destruction is being created through soy being produced to feed factory farms here in Europe, in the US, is huge. This is all interconnected, and it is about all these different things. And for me, if we're going to achieve things like the Better Chicken Commitment, we are going to need to have less chickens. And so we need to be working on that too, in a way that, we've sort of seen that working just with trying to get people to change their diets on a one-to-one basis hasn't been hugely impactful to the degree we would hope. And so having this more institutional change is how we can make big impact for animals and for the environment and for climate and for people and all at once. So for me, it's just like, this is a no-brainer.
Can you say more about how it, I guess, like the tie-in with animal welfare? Obviously there's like the basic case where, if companies make these protein splits, they have to offer more plants and less animal protein. That means they'll be serving less animals in their supply chain. But I guess it's like, they're not, those animals won't necessarily be a higher welfare unless I guess the other groups are doing their work. And also there's like these tricky things where it's like, if it's implemented poorly, there could still be this beef to chicken or fish swap if the retailer's like sole focus is greenhouse gas emissions. So I guess like how is Madre Brava balancing those things? And how does that all work together?
Great question. So our North Star is the EAT Lancet report that just came out, the second version in this month. And it's very clear about planetary boundaries, about how to live within planetary boundaries. And that is not just looking at beef, that is looking at all meat across the divide. And when we look at Europe, where we're working with retailers, that means a reduction across all things. It does not just mean reduction in meat.
So wait, so you mean like reduction in all species? Is that what you mean?
Exactly. We're talking about like not just red meat that needs to be reduced. When we're working with retailers to get these protein split commitments, we're talking about all meat, and they're aware of it's all meat. And I think a good example, we're seeing this already happening now in the Netherlands, where the majority of vast majority, like 95% of the retailers, have committed to this protein split change. And they're already doing things like not putting promotions on meat. And it's not just red meat, it's promotions on all meat, right? So these kind of things are going to see this shift. And why does that mean in terms of, of course, the obvious reduction in animals is good for animals, obviously. But beyond that, the reduction will allow for better chicken commitment, where there's, higher, you need a greater stocking density, which means you need space on the farms, for instance. And it reduces that population on the farm, which reduces pollution by virtue if there's less animals. We know that the BCC, better chicken commitment, the challenge has been on the breed sticking point. And if we look to the retailers in Norway, they actually changed the breed. They've reduced the number of animals in their supply chain by virtue of the fact that the animals are dying less before they get to actually being slaughtered. But also because the quality of meat is better, they can have fewer birds. And then they're also growing grain from more locally. They're not having to import soy because these birds don't need soy to the same degree. These fast-growing birds do need the soy. And so as we see this, we're pushing retailers to look at their emissions. We're including where's the feed coming for these animals. And if you're going to increase chicken, you're going to increase the feed coming from typically the Amazon. And that is not going to help you with your greenhouse gas emissions. So it is, this work is holistic. It is interconnected and it all matters. And we need retailers to be moving on the BCC, but we need them to be moving on greenhouse gases together. And a sustainable system includes all those factors. It means sustainable for people, it means sustainable for animals, and it means sustainable for the planet.
Yeah. I think that makes sense what you said about, at least in the UK, so there's been a flurry of very impressive work by the likes of THL UK and Open Cages and others to get retailers to basically move to 20% more space for all broiler chickens, meat chickens, which is amazing. But yes, now there's been like some sudden flurry of them trying to build more farms and like kind of struggling with that. And I think what you're kind of saying is, if these retailers did agree to gradually reduce the number of animal protein and chicken they were selling, it'd be easier for them to meet these commitments without it being such like struggle to build new stuff. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
On, I guess, this campaigning against retailers point, I guess I'm kind of curious to hear, seems like it's going way better than I even thought in Netherlands. 95% of supermarkets have agreed to do this. Can you say more about that, or like other major wins you guys have had?
Yeah, so that's happened in the Netherlands, and now we're working in Germany. So Lidl International has made a protein split commitment, and obviously they're a huge discounter in Europe, and to have their commitment is amazing. We've just got a new director in the UK, and we're working in Spain as well come January. And so we're really targeting the biggest retailers in Europe to make these protein split commitments. And we're seeing traction in Germany to start with, where we've been working the longest.
Do you think it helps or hurts when you have multiple groups campaigning against retailers for different asks? I think of like people doing it on retailers on cage free, then a BCC, and there's now protein splits. I'm sure there's other stuff that we're not even aware of. Do you think this is all good because it adds like pressure to do good things, or it's kind of like confusing with the retailers, or they kind of pick something that is like vaguely them?
Well, I think this comes back to what we were talking about, where it's like interconnected. So I think it can be tricky if you're pushing on chicken and pigs and beef and whatever, fish, whatever. If you have all those things at once, I can see those are very different supply chains in that sense. But if when we're looking at greenhouse gas emissions and that impacts all animals, and we're asking this, plus it actually like fits nicely with like reducing the number of hours means you can make more higher welfare. I see it as complementary and not as something that's competing.
Nice. That makes sense. What is one bit of news you are grateful to hear recently?
One bit of news that I'm really pleased about hearing, I would say, we just did a survey of doctors in across Europe, healthcare professionals, and 9 out of 10 of them believe that we eat too much meat. And that was just like very reassuring to me, because I think in the past, I've even experienced it personally, that hasn't been necessarily the views of the medical profession. And I think that's shifting as people are beginning to see that the diets are really impacting the health of people. So that was very uplifting. And I think also here in the US, Mission Barns now being sold up in San Francisco, it's just very exciting times for that kind of cultivated meat in a way that's bringing more plants to people's diets at the same time as like taste and will eventually, I think they're really working hard on the affordability side. So for me, that's kind of the future is here in that sense.
That's cool. Yeah, I didn't know about the doctor study, so that's very exciting to hear. 9 out of 10, so it's cool. What are some media recommendations you might have to listeners? This can be books, podcasts, whatever.
I really love this book that I'm reading currently, which is on fungus, the enchanting world of fungus.
Nice.
It's just incredible to see the interconnect. We just wouldn't exist without fungus. We just wouldn't exist without it. It's like everywhere. It's just creating connections between us all, and it's amazing. And so that book I absolutely love.
That's cool.
I think podcast-wise, I'm really enjoying Rich Roll recently. I think he's been putting out I can end up listening to a lot of like self-helpy things. And what I love about it is like, it's more like an easy listen and you learn as you go, but it's like really conversational. So I really appreciate that. I would say my kind of out there podcast that I'm loving right now is, do you know Mayim Bialik? She was in Big Bang Theory. She's a neuroscientist as well, actress. And she has a podcast called The Breakdown. And it's just like very interesting. It mixes science with spirituality and just like looking at the universe and physics. And I find it fascinating. She's just had so many fascinating people on there. So I love that podcast.
That's cool. That's a lot of different big topics from the universe to your mind. So that's cool. I will check it out. I've not heard of this.
Yeah.
Finally, how can people follow you or Madre Brava's work?
Yep, you can find us. Our website is madrebrava.org, nice and easy. And then LinkedIn is actually the place to see us most active. So you can go to Madre Brava's LinkedIn. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect. So there would be the two main places, I think, to look out for our work.
Cool. Yeah, as you said, you don't maybe love being a figurehead, so there's not much more about you that where people can follow you. Nice. With that, I guess, thank you so much, Vicky, for coming on. This has been very fun. Lots of interesting, I guess, personal stories and I think useful lessons for people. So I think, thanks for your time and all the work you guys are doing.
Thank you, James. It's been lovely. Really appreciate the time.